Oh, hormone regulation post hormone cancer. So, the classic story, I suppose, of someone with breast cancer that was a hormone positive breast cancer. And we see a lot of clients who are being told they're not allowed any hormones at all. They are struggling. They've usually been put on something like tamoxifen if they can tolerate it, and they are struggling with those hormones and the hormone fallout. From our perspective, we have to be so careful with supplementation, nothing that can stimulate any hormones, no macas, no soys, no Vitex agnus castus, no, just so careful. And we really do go in with just, food and things like the estrogen detox pathways. But from your perspective, where do you go with that?
Yeah, it's really tough from our perspective too, Claire. I think that's one of the, it's so difficult, isn't it, when we're facing that situation? Because I think the point is, what I always say to people is, look, cancer is loss of cell control. And so when that cell has grown hormone receptors, estrogen, progesterone receptors. We can't even say what caused the cancer. It doesn't mean that that was the cause, but cells can grow hormone receptors. Many cells have hormone receptors. Once a cell has hormone receptors, you cannot give anything that could make that cell grow. So that's the issue that we have in someone that's had a hormone receptor positive cancer. And yeah, I think it's tough. I think it's really, really tough. But I also think it's correct to kind of, we have to do the approach that you and I take, which is not giving anything because um, it's such an emotive diagnosis and you cannot risk any possibility, any possibility of recurrence. That's the thing. I think if someone is really, really struggling, they've been, 5 years plus post their diagnosis, they should have a conversation with their oncologist. And certainly if they're hormone receptor negative, maybe they're hormone receptor negative cancer and it's been coming up to 10 years post their cancer diagnosis. Actually, if they speak to their oncologist, many might believe that there's no greater risk than anyone else in taking hormones. So in that case, working with the oncologist and the hormone specialist should liaise, they should be in close contact. And there can be things in that case that may help, vaginal estrogen, something like that. But I think it's very, very tough for people who have a hormone receptor positive cancer because
Mm.
you don't want to be giving anything that could make the cells grow.
Mm. It's really difficult, isn't it? Because so many of my clients have said things to me like, but it was estrogen positive, it wasn't progesterone positive. And I've done my research and, I
Yeah.
can't sleep and I'm just feeling really like out of my mind. I'm really certain, and I'm still very perimenopausal. I'm certain that it's progesterone that I need. But I've been told it's because progesterone and the and estrogen receptors are so close together that if just by stimulating one, you could stimulate the other. So it's about caution over everything else.
I think it's about caution. Yeah, I think we're just okay to say, we don't know, right? So it's have to be
Mm.
caution over everything else. I think the other thing is that actually, if you take just progesterone, that might be fine for perimenopause. What happens when you're in menopause? Because at that point, just taking the progesterone is going to make your symptoms of estrogen deficiency worse, potentially. So it's never that simple either. But yeah, it's sad. It's tough. It's tough. It's very, very tough because we don't have many options. I think we just have to err on the side of caution.
Yeah, we very much focus on the body, what the body will still be able to produce itself, and just really supporting people to be able to make more of it.
Yeah.
Right diet, mindfulness, all of the things, trying to keep their adrenals calm, make sure we're not opting for cortisol over progesterone, all of those, the real fundamentals. So, is there anything else from your perspective that you can recommend other than the diet, lifestyle adaptation, supplementation? Is there anything else that we can work with or that you recommend for those women who are really struggling?
I mean, I think everything comes into those categories. I think there's so much, like even when you talk about lifestyle, there's so much about, yeah, there's so many self-regulation things that people could do that could probably all come under all of those categories. So, no, I think the main thing is I do believe all of that really helps. It does work, it does help. So I think people just have to have to really explore. And the other thing I would say is that if it's a hormone receptor negative cancer, it's been many years since the diagnosis, and you're still really struggling, then I think it's fair to speak to the oncologist and have that joined up care with your hormone
I
specialist.
love that. The joined up care, that's the really important piece, isn't it? So it's really interesting to hear you talk about that from your perspective in terms of that multidisciplinary team. So from our perspective, it's about bringing in a specialist as an, if that's then relevant and someone's really struggling, okay, well, let's see if there's been any further advances. Let's refer you over here. And from your perspective, it's about creating that that connection there. I think I'm just so fascinated by why, or that this trend that we see for these hormone cancers coming in so significantly around early perimenopause as progesterone starts dropping, um and from your perspective, what can we do to try and support ourselves through that time?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that isn't talked about enough is the risks of doing nothing, right? Because
Mm.
perimenopause itself is a risk. As soon as we start to lose our progesterone, we do enter a state of inflammation. We do enter a state of slightly more increased insulin resistance and oxidative stress. So, with best will in the world, all of us from mid 40s, we do have to be a bit more mindful of how we're eating, what we're doing with our muscle mass, how we're managing our insulin. Um, and perimenopause, the natural decline in progesterone exacerbates this. So this does not mean that everyone needs to take hormones, but it does mean that we all need to be mindful of this shift. And I think the mainstream approach is still a bit binary. It's like you're in menopause or you're not. Perimenopause is largely ignored. Women over 45, according to the guidelines, are told they don't need to be tested. But yet, if someone was under 45, if someone was 39 and they had irregular periods, they would get the hormone test. So it's not
Mm.
hormone tests are invalid or that there are one snapshot. Because a lot of people think hormone tests are invalid. But actually, how do you diagnose premature menopause then? You do diagnose it with a hormone test. But the point is you get that test when you're younger because having going through menopause at 39 is not normal and everyone would say you need to be on hormones. Now, actually, if you're in perimenopause at 45, that's normal. It is normal, it's true. But that doesn't mean that there aren't lifestyle and diet and potentially hormone modifications that you should make to stay optimal. So that's, I think, the shift that I think is so important. Um,
Yes.
yeah, and it depends how it's affecting you, but many people do find that they just start to gain weight and have the insomnia, and then they feel more labile, a bit more acopic, a bit more anxious, and things like the weight gain. I mean, if it's visceral fat, if we start to put on fat around our middle, that's the fat that starts to send out metabolic signals. So that's the fat we don't like, right? Because it's the one that then sends out signals to the rest of the body that then kind of put us in the negative spiral whereby we lay down more visceral fat and we kind of become more inflamed. So we really want to break that. And then, of course, if we're not sleeping, that's going to dysregulate our hunger hormones like ghrelin and leptin. And we're going to be in a bit of a negative spiral. So I think if anyone feels that they're starting to spiral, they're just not feeling good in their body, it's really, really worth getting help and nipping that in the bud.
Mm. Oh, this is absolute gold. You're absolutely right.